guys, Valentine's Day just around the corner. I wanted to come to you with a fun, quick little project. What I decided to do was turn to one of the books that I have here in the shop. It's called Trendy Tables 3. I found in here they have a nice heart-themed table runner that is great for stash busting. And you can see on the wall behind me that I've already started piecing it together. I have a good deal of it done already. So what I'm gonna do is kind of walk you through it so that you know how to go about doing this. If you're interested in the book, you like the tutorial, the link to my shop is gonna be down below, so you can go ahead and click on that link and it'll take you right to the book. Also, I have a sale going on right now in the shop. All of my Christmas fabrics, pre-cuts, patterns, anything that's Christmas is marked 20% off through the end of January. So hop over there, grab some good stuff, get yourself ready for next Christmas. Okay, here we go. For this table runner, you can actually make it whatever size you want, as long as your table requires. But you're gonna need a few different cuts. So I went into my stash and I grabbed a bunch of my pink fabrics. I needed pieces cut that were 2.5 inches square, and then the other piece that I need is going to be 2.5 by 4.5 inches. So I have a square and I have a rectangle for each one of my pieces. For my background fabric, I'm also gonna need squares that are 1.25 inches square, 2.5 by 2.5 inch squares. And then I'm also going to need 4.5 inch squares. Now, once everything is put together, it's gonna make this really cute little heart. And with these hearts, you're going to just arrange them in different ways to achieve the pattern that we see on the wall. So I'm going to start my sewing with a 2.5 inch square and a 4.5 by 2.5 inch rectangle. And in the corners, I'm going to use my 1.25 inch square. You can see that I've drawn a diagonal from one corner to the other. So I'm going to now place one square in the top left corner of my pink square and put one of the green squares in the top left corner of my pink rectangle. I'm going to go through this process by chain sewing, which I think is really important. Chain sewing helps with efficiency and it just helps you get through one step pretty quickly. So that's what I'm gonna do here. Okay, so I'm gonna put it in, lining up my needle with the diagonal on my square, and I'm going to stitch directly on that diagonal to get to the other point. So I start here on my diagonal and stitch across to the top edge. Once I get to the end of that green square, I stop with my needle in the down position. I insert my new square, position it just right, and continue on with my stitching. Guys, I have a thing about sewing with my needle in the down position. What that means is that I start and I stop with the needle down. That helps me to get a nice seam without bird nests underneath. So you can see that now I've stitched across from one corner to the other of my green square, and I've done that on both of these. Clip off that corner, leaving about 1/4 inch worth of fabric beyond your seam. Okay, that's going to allow me to press out that way. Now, the pattern in this book for this particular quilt is really, really wonderful because it tells you which direction you need to press all of your pieces. Pay very close attention to that, because as we get into the process of putting that block, that heart block together, it's going to start making sense why things are pressed in different directions. First one that we've attached on both our small square and our rectangle, we're going to press that seam outward, which means that the seam allowance is going to be tucked behind the green fabric. The next one that we're going to do will go in the opposite corner, so it's going to be in the top right corner of both of our pink fabrics. And here's a fun little detail. Normally when you do a stitch and flip method, which is what we're doing here, your two squares overlap in the middle of the pink to allow for a seam allowance up top. In this particular pattern, they don't overlap. So when you put them together, they're going to hit right in the center of the pink. It's not, the green will not overlap. So I'm gonna feed it through once again. Before I get to the end of my pink, I make sure I finish with my needle down so I can insert my other pink piece. Again, I'm going to clip off those corners and then I'm going to press. Now this time, instead of pressing up toward the green like I did here, I'm going to press this one down. So these seams are going to go in opposite directions. If you want a little extra help before you take it to the iron, you can finger press it. But this is how it's going to look. One is facing up, one's facing down. So now we have both of our pink pieces set to go. And you can see that the green touches right in the center. It does not overlap, and that is exactly what you want. So the next step to creating the heart is going to be to add one of the 2.5-inch squares to the top of the 2.5 pink piece with the green. Now, one thing to make sure you do is make sure that your heart is facing out. It's going away. So your green, your solid green is on top and the point of your pink is facing outward. I'm going to sew the two of them together, but I'm going to sew with the green fabric on the bottom touching my feed dogs because I want to be able to control the direction of the seams in the pink fabric. So I've sewn the bottom part of the heart, the small pink piece, to the 2.5-inch green piece. So this is what I have. Heads up, as you're doing your seams, make sure that you are always consistent, always using that quarter, but you want to use a scant quarter. So you want it to be just, your seam allowance to be just a little bit shy of a full 1/4 inch. Okay, so to press this, I'm going to press with the single solid green piece on top, like this, and then I'm going to press my seam allowance so that the seam allowance is now behind the green. That's how it looks. Now putting them together here, I'm going to fold my green and pink piece on top of my long pink, line them up, and sew down that edge, that center edge. One of the reasons why I like this pattern is because it really does not require any pinning, and I'm not a fan of pinning. Here is my heart. Now with the heart, which way do I press it? Since this strip of fabric, the long pink, has fewer seams going on, it's less busy, I'm going to press toward that one. People ask me all the time, which way should I press? Do I press to the dark side? Do I press seams open? How do I press? Just as a general rule, press to the side that has the fewer seams. And if you have a bunch of seams that are converging on one common seam, then press it open to reduce the amount of bulk that's there. So this pattern told us to press to the long pink, which is what I did. And now I have my heart. So as you guys can see up here, I have my table runner that is partially assembled. I have 1, 2, 3, 4 hearts in position. This one is a little bit longer than the one right beside it, and that's just because of seam allowance. This row I already have assembled. If you guys were wondering why certain colors are next to each other, I was playing around with the blocks, and it just kind of made sense to have 2 darks next to 2 lights. Together we're making clusters of hearts with the green center square. And so to kind of balance out how your table runner ends up looking, you don't want to cluster all of your darker, more intense colors together in one and then have the lighter ones floating out. You want to have a nice mix of all of your colors, all of the saturation, all of the intensity of colors. You want to have that balanced out nicely. It's really nice to have a wall like this with a little bit of flannel on it where you can audition your blocks, put them in different positions to see exactly what suits you best, what suits the pattern best, especially when you're dealing with a scrappy quilt. The pattern wants you to put everything in rows. My brain said, yeah, put it in 4-patch like that. No, no, no. The pattern wants you putting it in rows. And there's a reason for that too. So we're going to move back over to the table. I'm going to put this row together and I'm going to put this row together as well. Okay. Now this is another place where you're going to see how the importance of how you press your blocks comes into play. When I connect this top heart to the second heart, fold one over like we always do, what ends up happening is so cool. Your seams are going in different directions, so they're gonna nest. So on this top piece, this center seam pushes over to my right and the bottom seam pushes over to my left. What? Not only that, but those diagonal seams do the same thing. This one on the bottom pushes out to my left and on the top it pushes to my right. So make sure that as you are putting your blocks together, that you are paying attention to the way the designer had suggested you do your seams, because that's going to keep you from having a whole lot of bulk to deal with. I mentioned earlier that you don't really need to do a whole lot of pinning with this pattern. I'm not doing any pinning because those seams that nest together really give you that registration point where you can snug them together and they're not going to move. I made a mistake. Can you see my mistake? My hearts are going in the same direction and they should not be. It's super important, guys, to make sure you don't get yourself turned around and double check yourself before you actually sew. This is the second time I'm picking things out in this project, and that's fine. It's part of the quilting process, right? The sewing process. It's just a little thread and it happens to everyone. Okay, so my problem was not with these two being put together. My problem is actually with these two being put together. This heart needs to turn out that way. Okay, so I have my two here. Now, here's the thing. Again, back to the instructions. It tells you exactly which direction to press your seams. So the top one, the first one on the very right, was pressed down. The next one's up, down, up. So this one is going to be pressed so all the seam allowances point down toward this dotted heart. As you press, make sure that you are not having any kind of a negative effect on any of those extra seams in the back. Don't just without having any concern for what's going on that you've already pressed. So I'm pressing all of my seams toward my bottom dotted heart. Good, good, good. So now seams are going in the correct direction. So these are all coming down. This last bit that has the solid green squares on them, that is going to press upward. Okay, so there. All of these are pointed up and the adjacent is pointing downward. So I can now put these two together like that. Again, if you don't like to pin, you really don't have to. Not in this pattern. Now the instructions then tell you, once you have your rows put together like this main vertical seam needs to be pressed open. Why open? Because you have so many seams converging on that one center seam. You want to press it open to reduce the bulk. And here we go. So I have two rows put together. I just put together so many of these little hearts and it went together so quickly and easily, guys. Look, the pieces that we're using were as small as 1¼ inches, but don't let that discourage you from a project like this. It goes by very quickly. The pieces go together beautifully, and really there are no points to try and match up. You know, when you work with half square triangle blocks or you work with flying geese, you're always trying to get that point to land just on the seam. Well, this project doesn't require you to land any points on a seam, because if you check it out right down here at the edge of each one of your hearts, it blunts it off for you, so it gives it more of a curved look instead of an arrow pointy look. Makes for a really fun, easy project to do. I would tell any confident beginner to try this project. And I hope that you guys do. If you have any questions, go ahead and drop them in the comments below. If you're in the market for a great project book that has awesome instructions, I would suggest this book filled with all sorts of table runners, and that will also be in the links below. Make sure you subscribe wherever that subscribe button happens to be. If you're looking for a color theory video to help with figuring out placement of your colors, then you can click that button right there and it'll take you right there. I'm so glad you guys joined me today, and I hope to see you again for another quilting video. Bye.